In the middle of the North Atlantic, a jagged island rises from the sea like a myth carved into stone. This is Iceland. Forged by volcanic eruptions and sculpted by glaciers, it is a land where the raw forces of nature are not only seen but felt. Amidst this elemental landscape live a people who have adapted for over a millennium. Known as the Icelanders, they are descendants of Norse explorers and Celtic settlers who braved the unknown around 870 AD. Their culture, shaped by isolation and endurance, is both fiercely modern and deeply ancient. This is not just the story of a country. It is the story of a resilient people thriving at the edge of the habitable world. We begin in Iceland's capital, where 2/3 of the population live. It is a city of contrasts, colorful, corrugated iron rooftops against gray winter skies, geothermal steam rising between sleek cafes and ancient churches. Life here is closely tied to nature. Hot water that heats homes comes from beneath the earth, while fishing remains a cultural backbone. But beyond its modern shell lies a heartbeat of tradition. On cold evenings, families still gather to read aloud, carrying on the legacy of a literate nation that once had one of the highest publication rates per capita in the world. Traveling inland, we reach the harsh but beautiful highlands, a place so barren and vast it resembles another planet. Few live here year-round, but Icelanders frequently journey across this interior for spiritual renewal or quiet solitude. The wind howls across black sand deserts and moss-covered lava fields. Here, one can still feel what the early settlers must have felt: alone, surrounded by vastness, and dependent on one another to survive. It was in these conditions that Icelanders developed their fierce independence and deep sense of community. In the shadow of glaciers, farmers tend to hardy sheep and Icelandic horses, animals that have lived here for centuries. The Icelandic horse, with its fifth gait and shaggy mane, is more than a tool. It is a symbol of pride, history, and friendship. The bond between human and animal is profound. Winter storms can trap families in their homes for days, and in those times, it is often the animals who become their life. In spring, the great sheep roundup becomes a celebration, a cultural ritual of cooperation and heritage that has remained unchanged for generations. We journey next to the Westfjords, one of the most remote regions of Iceland, where steep cliffs dive into the ocean and silence dominates. The people here live with fewer conveniences, but they possess something rare: an unshakable patience and a profound relationship with nature. Children walk to school in the dark winter morning with wind-chapped cheeks and backpacks slung low. Elders speak of old fishing stories, of lost ships, and of sea monsters believed to live in the icy waters. These tales, told by firelight, have long anchored the Icelandic belief that the seen and unseen coexist in daily life. In Iceland, folklore isn't just remembered, it's lived, or hidden. People are believed by many to inhabit rocks and hillsides. Roads have been rerouted to avoid disturbing these mythical beings, whether metaphor or belief. The stories reveal something deeper: a national respect for the land and a caution not to disturb its balance. Folklore is woven into the fabric of daily life. Tour guides leave offerings by certain stones. Grandparents teach children to whisper greetings to hills. To outsiders, it may seem superstitious, but to Icelanders, it's part of living harmoniously in a place where nature always has the final say. But Iceland is not frozen in time. The youth of blend old soul and new voice. In basement bars and art spaces, modern Icelandic music and literature are thriving. Bands like Sigur and of Monsters and Men carry the melancholic tone of the landscape into global soundscapes. Poets publish volumes inspired by volcanic ash, melting glaciers, and broken love. Even video game designers and coders incorporate Icelandic myths into their digital worlds. Despite being one of the smallest nations in population, Iceland punches far above its weight in creativity and cultural export. We now visit the south coast, where glaciers crawl toward black sand beaches and waterfalls plunge like silver threads from tall cliffs. Here, tourism has exploded in recent years, challenging both the environment and traditional ways of life. Small villages that once relied solely on fishing now welcome thousands of visitors. While tourism has brought wealth and opportunity, it has also raised questions. How much can this delicate land handle? Icelanders, ever resourceful, are adapting, promoting sustainable practices, and educating tourists on how to travel with care. It's a national conversation how to share their home without losing its soul. Not far from the popular site lies Vatnajökull, Europe's largest glacier, a frozen titan hiding volcanoes beneath its icy skin. Scientists here study how this glacier changes, because to understand it is to understand the future of the planet. Icelanders live with nature's volatility. They build flood barriers near volcanoes, track seismic data daily, and have a national alert system ready for eruption. But they also build trust in each other, in the earth, and in ancient knowledge passed down through the sagas. When the age of Geologigull volcano erupted in 2010, grounding flights across Europe, Icelanders calmly watched and prepared. They knew this land does not belong to them, they belong to it. Iceland's economy is unusual. It's powered not only by tourism and fishing, but by something invisible. Beneath lava fields are massive data centers powered by clean geothermal energy. Bitcoin miners, tech companies, and global businesses have found a safe haven in Iceland's cool climate and political stability. Yet, amid this tech boom, farmers still harvest hay by hand and children still grow up learning how to knit wool and recite poetry. Icelanders walk both forward and backward through time. They are proof that tradition and innovation don't have to compete. They can coexist like lava flowing beneath ice. In the northern town of Akureyri, life moves slower but deeper. Here, the winters are long and the sun barely rises. People gather in hot pools to talk politics, poetry, and weather, sometimes all at once. The hot water soothes more than bodies. It's where decisions are made, friendships are deepened, and ideas are born. Iceland's public pools are more than recreation, they are democracy in liquid form. This communal bathing, deeply ingrained in the culture, reflects an Icelandic principle. No matter how isolated or modern life becomes, people need connection. Education in Iceland is seen not as a duty, but as a birthright. Children are taught not just facts, but how to think. Schools encourage curiosity, debate, and storytelling. There is no rigid hierarchy between teacher and student. Learning is a shared journey. Icelanders believe a free society must be an educated one. Their literacy rates are among the highest in the world. Nearly every home has a bookshelf lined with Icelandic authors, from Loxness to contemporary poets. Books are given as gifts on Christmas Eve, a tradition called Jólabókaflóð, Christmas book flood. In Iceland, to read is to live well, and yet, despite the idyllic image, Icelanders face challenges. Mental health, especially during the long, dark winters, is a growing concern. The pressure of modern life, isolation, and climate anxiety weigh heavily on many. But unlike in other countries, openness is encouraged. Therapy is normalized. Community support strong, and nature is prescribed as medicine. Walks by the fjord, horseback rides in silence, standing alone before a waterfall, these are treatments. The Icelandic approach to mental wellness is one of honesty, simplicity, and communal care. In Isafura, a fishing town nestled between steep cliffs, we meet a generation of old fishermen whose sons and daughters now work in tech or tourism. They speak of a sea that gave everything, and sometimes took even more. Many have never left Iceland, nor wanted to. Their stories are etched in salt and wind, told in dialects that fade with time. But they do not resent the new. They are proud of their grandchildren building apps in or studying in Berlin. Change, to them, is like the tide, unstoppable, necessary, and always returning home. Every summer, the midnight sun graces Iceland, casting a soft gold across the land that never sleeps. Children play until past midnight, birds sing through the twilight, and adults sip coffee on porches, speaking softly. It's during this season that the Icelandic spirit seems most visible, light-filled, unhurried, and full of quiet wonder. Festivals bloom in small towns, music fills the valleys, and boats glide over glassy fjords. It is a celebration not just of the sun, but of survival, of making it through another winter. Icelanders know their land is fragile. Melting glaciers, rising seas, and increased tourism threaten what makes their island unique. But they do not despair there. Whether by planting trees, investing in green energy, or teaching the next generation to tread lightly, Icelanders are guardians of their home. They live not against the environment, but with it. Their strength lies in their humility. To live in Iceland is to bow to something greater: the earth, the sky, and the stories that bind them. In the end, what defines the Icelander is not hardship or isolation, but imagination. It is the belief that beneath every rock is a hidden world, that storms can be sung away, and that the land is not merely landscape but a living, breathing relative. This is not romanticism. It is resilience. It is knowing who you are because you know where you stand. Icelanders do not just endure, they create, and in doing so, they teach the world something timeless, that even in the coldest places, stories keep the human heart warm. Winter descends like a velvet curtain across the island, blanketing the mountains in silence and transforming Iceland into a land of frost and shadows. In some remote villages, the sun barely brushes the horizon, casting a brief golden hue before vanishing into a month-long twilight. But even in this darkness, Icelanders shine. The heart of winter is Christmas, not just a holiday, but a deeply rooted tradition woven from both Christian and pagan threads. Advent candles flicker in every window. Children leave shoes on their windowsills for the 13 mischievous Yule lads, figures from Icelandic folklore, who replace Santa Claus and bring small gifts or potatoes if one has misbehaved. Families gather to bake laufabrauð, intricate snowflake-like breads, and drink molten Doran soda, blends unique to Icelandic tables. But beyond the festivities, winter is also a test of patience and mental endurance. Roads disappear under snow, and fierce winds can isolate entire towns. Yet Icelanders are not easily shaken. They've developed an almost spiritual relationship with unpredictability. Plans are made, but always with the phrase, veja leifja. If the weather allows, this humility in the face of nature is not defeat, but wisdom. It allows them to adapt, to rest, and to reflect. And in those long, dark months, while the rest of the world rushes, Icelanders write, paint, compose, and dream. They emerge not weary, but creatively reborn. The winter doesn't just shape their lifestyle. As the deep winter progresses, a quiet beauty takes hold of the island, harsh, stark, but profoundly moving. Snow muffles the world, and even the ocean seems to whisper rather than roar. In the northern towns like Húsavík and Siglufjörður, Life slows to a rhythm dictated by the dark. Children walk to school under the pale blue twilight of midday, bundled in layers of wool and down, their laughter carried on icy air. Inside homes and community centers, the tradition of Samvera togetherness becomes vital. Locals gather for small concerts, book readings, or spontaneous storytelling nights. Here, the boundaries between generations blur. A teenager might perform a piece on the violin, followed by a grandmother reciting a passage from a 14th century saga. This blending of old and new is not nostalgic, it's deliberate. In Iceland, culture is not something preserved behind glass. It is something lived daily, passed hand to hand like bread. Meanwhile, out on the frozen fjords, fishers continue their work, enduring sub-zero winds and black seas in the pursuit of cod and haddock. Their resilience is not romantic, it is survival. Fishing remains one of the economic lifelines of the nation, and many families can trace their heritage through the salt-soaked decks of wooden boats. In Iceland, even the darkest months are alive with activity, with meaning, and with deep cultural grounding. While other parts of the world may flee the cold, Icelanders lean into it, finding warmth in community and purpose in perseverance. By late winter, something subtle shifts in the Icelandic air. The snow still falls, the fjords still freeze, and the northern lights continue to flicker like green ghosts across the sky, but deep within the Icelanders, a sense of awakening stirs. This is the season of Vora, an ancient midwinter festival honoring the Norse gods and the fortitude of ancestors. Across the country, communities host feasts where fermented shark, pickled ram's testicles, and sour blood pudding are served alongside rye bread and the black death. While the menu may seem unpalatable to outsiders, to Icelanders, it is a culinary celebration of survival, a reverent nod to the days when nothing could be wasted. Yet amid this fierce clinging to heritage, the present pulses vividly. In Reykjavik's music halls and small-town theaters, artists perform daring new works. Young Icelanders remix old sagas into modern plays or compose music inspired by melting glaciers. It is not contradiction, it is continuation. In Iceland, the past is not a museum. It is a collaborator. Slowly, the skies begin to lengthen. By March, the sun hangs longer in the sky each day, and something in the people shifts. Ice still clings to the rivers, but birds return, and the first signs of moss peeking through snow are met with quiet excitement. School children release small hand-carved boats into streams, honoring ancient seafaring traditions. Lambing season begins, and in farms across the country, families huddle in stables beside their animals, welcoming life into the world as they have for centuries. These moments, tiny and profound, mark the slow unraveling of winter's grip. Spring in Iceland is not sudden. It unfolds cautiously, like a door left ajar. The days grow longer, the wind softens, and light returns to the land in a way that feels earned, not given. It is a season not only of thawing but of reckoning. Glaciers shed pieces of themselves into rising rivers. Coastal cliffs echo once more with the cries of seabirds returning from their winter migrations. Icelanders, to return to their gardens, to the roads, to the highlands. It is in this season that the outdoors becomes a sanctuary again. Hiking trails reopen. Families packed their run-to-slow Sunday drives through the countryside and visit ancestral farms or geothermal pools tucked between hills. Elders tell stories, not just of myth, but of resilience. The year the volcanoes shut the skies, the storm that buried a village, the avalanche that took Friendsbud, how they rebuilt, replanted, remained. Icelanders do not worship nature, but they revere it. They understand its moods, They adapt to its warnings, and above all, they listen. In spring, listening takes on a new dimension. The creak of melting ice, the rustle of wind through grass, the quiet crack of rock under heatall are messages. They remind Icelanders that theirs is a living land, unpredictable and sacred. In these longer days, many take time to reflect, not out of sentimentality, but stewardship. To be Icelandic is to be part of an unspoken pact, to protect the land that challenges you, to respect the weather that shapes you, and to live in a way that allows your great-grandchildren to hear the same stories you did. Summer arrives, not with fanfare but with light, an endless, golden, all-encompassing light that floods the island and changes everything. For weeks, the sun barely dips below the horizon, casting a soft glow over mountains, meadows, and rooftops through the midnight hours. This is the time when Iceland exhales. The people, long accustomed to dark and cold, now burst into motion with a quiet kind of joy. The landscape itself seems to shimmer with life. Lupin flowers paint the hills in waves of violet. Puffins return to nest on sea cliffs. Waterfalls swell with glacial melt, and the air carries the scent of moss and salt. For Icelanders, summer is not merely a season, it's a reward, a celebration, a temporary dream they know won't last. Farmers work nearly around the clock, cutting and drying hay while the skies allow. Tourists swell into small towns, but locals take it in stride, some opening their homes, others guiding hikes across volcanic fields, or leading horseback rides through valleys where elves are said to dwell. The land, which seemed barren and brutal just months ago, now feels generous. Families travel the ring road, camping in remote spots under skies that never go black. Children fish from piers, catch Arctic char in clean rivers, and learn the names of birds from their grandparents. The pace of life quickens, but the depth remains. Icelanders do not squander this light. They absorb it, store it, hold it in their bones for the darkness ahead. There is music in the streets, bonfires on beaches, and poetry in open-air readings beside ancient stone cairns. Summer is a living memory, short but unforgettable. At the heart of this luminous season are the gatherings, the cultural festivals, heritage days, and communal rituals that define Icelandic summer. One of the most treasured is the National Day on June 17, where parades fill the streets of every town, from Eslogover to the tiniest fishing villages along the fjord. Children wear traditional dress, musicians play in public squares, and speeches honor Sigurðsson, the leader of Iceland's independence movement. But beneath the bunting and fireworks lies something deeper. Fierce pride in survival, in identity, and in being small but sovereign. Icelanders remember that just decades ago, they were a nation of farmers and fishers, overlooked by the world. Now, their language is protected, their literature celebrated, their land one of the most unique ecosystems on Earth. They gather not to boast, but to reaffirm who they are. In the countryside, community homecomings bring together entire regions for food, dance, and memory. Elders reunite with childhood friends. Young people hear old songs, and everyone tells stories of lost ships, haunted valleys, or the summer when the sheep ran wild. These events are not performances. They are transmissions of Icelandic soul from one generation to the next. And even as global trends seep into Icelandic life, these rituals remain intact, cherished. As the summer light stretches into July and early August, Icelanders soak in not only warmth and beauty, but meaning. They know the shadows are never far behind, but that's why they live so vividly while they can. In every laugh around a campfire, in every shared bowl of skyr, in every guitar strummed by a geothermal pool, there is a quiet, unspoken promise. we will remember this, and we will return. As the long days of summer begin to shorten, a subtle melancholy enters the air, a feeling not of sadness, but of reverence. The golden sun still lingers late into the night, but now it dips lower, casting long shadows across moss-covered lava fields and shimmering fjords. The birds begin to fly south. The highland roads, open for only a few months, are slowly abandoned as travelers return to the lowlands. In remote cabins, hiking huts, and quiet farms, Icelanders take one last look at the horizon before preparing for the inward turn. Late summer is a time of both abundance and humility. Blueberries ripen across heaths, gathered into hand-woven baskets. Sheep, now fat from months of wild grazing, are rounded up in a great tradition known as a centuries-old event that is as much a cultural celebration as a practical task. Families on horseback fan out across the hills, guiding the sheep down toward communal pens. The roundup becomes a reunion. Neighbors work side by side, telling jokes, sharing flasks of coffee and passing down the methods their grandparents once used. Children learn to read the land, to spot the hoofprints on volcanic soil, to listen for the distant bleats in fog. Afterward, music and food follow. Accordion songs, fresh lamb stew, stories deep into the night. This moment when the wild meets the domestic, when the land gives back what it raised, is one of the most sacred rhythms of Icelandic life. It's a reminder that no matter how modern the country becomes, it still lives on the edge of something ancient, something untouched. In these final weeks before the frost returns, Icelanders engage in a quiet sort of ritual. The turning inward, summer's outward energy festivals. Travel, exploration gives way to a collective pause. In the cities, cafes grow a little quieter, with more books open on tables and conversations drawn in close. Artists retreat into studios. Writers sit with blank pages, their stories infused with the landscapes they've just walked through. Students return to school, not begrudgingly, but with a sense of continuity. Education in Iceland is not seen as separate from life, but as a living thread within it. Meanwhile, the skies begin to shift. The first hints of northern lights flicker faintly in September's darkness, like the early stirring of dreams. Farmers ready their barns, and knitters prepare wool for the colder months. Autumn here is not just a season, it is a mindset, a time to gather thoughts, resources, and stories, a time to remember what the land has given and what must be protected. All across the country, there is a softness to this change, a grace in the way Icelanders adjust their rhythm with the planets. They do not resist the waning light. They welcome it, knowing it brings focus, depth, and a return to what matters most: family, language, memory, and the land that continues to shape them. As they move toward another winter, Icelanders carry with them the richness of summer, not as nostalgia, but as fuel. Because in Iceland, every season is not an end or a beginning, it is a continuation of the great story they've always known how to tell. Even as the seasons change and the world rushes forward, Iceland remains. Not frozen in time, but timeless in character. The island does not shout its story. It hums it, a low, steady rhythm beneath volcanoes and glaciers, beneath turf-roofed cottages and neon-lit bookstores, beneath every footfall on basalt ground. The Icelanders themselves are like their land, composed, grounded, and full of quiet depth. A stranger might mistake this calm for aloofness, until they are invited in, not with fanfare, but with sincerity. A bowl of lamb stew shared after a hike, a long conversation in a steaming hot pot under falling snow, an unexpected poem recited in the pause between conversations. This is not just survival, it's stewardship. The Icelanders carry the weight of an island that is alive beneath them, that can shake and erupt and shift without notice. And yet, they don't flee it, they honor it. Their language remains almost unchanged since the medieval sagas were first written. Children grow up learning to read those sagas, not as dead literature, but as living maps of who they are. They don't chase growth at any cost. They choose sustainability, choosing often to do less so the land can last longer. They don't try to dominate nature, they adapt to it. They let the road stop where the moss must grow. They let the river flow, unchained by concrete. They understand something the rest of the world is only beginning to relearn. T always means expansion, sometimes it means in. And so as this final chapter fades to black, the island remains. A flickering lantern in the cold. See a place where stories outlive empire, where belief and reason walk side by side, where a nation of less than 400 people has carved a cultural legacy felt far beyond its shores. Iceland is not simply a country, it is a testament. That smallness can be powerful, that silence can be meaningful, that a people shaped by fire and frost can teach the world something enduring. How to live with the land, not on top of it. Long after the travelers leave and the last drone shot fades into fog, Iceland remains a land that doesn't perform for the camera but simply exists, with the same enduring humility that has carried it through centuries. Beneath every moss-covered stone is a story. In the way the wind shifts across Thingvellir, you can still feel the weight of Viking gatherings, of laws first spoken aloud by men who shaped a democracy on rock and silence. In the midnight quiet of Anistfjord's village, an old man sits by his window, the same window his father once looked out of during wartime blackouts, and his grandfather before that, who watched for fishing boats on the horizon. This continuity, this unbroken thread between past and present, is the heart of the Icelandic soul. For the Icelanders, legacy is not some grand monument, but the simple act of preservation of language, of land, of memory. They speak the tongue of their ancestors, not for purity, but because it still fits the mouth. They keep the old songs alive, not to impress the world, but to remind themselves of who they are. Young Icelanders go abroad to study, to create, to explore, and many return, pulled back not just by family, but by something deeper, a longing that feels geological. It is the pull of basalt cliffs, of fjords that hold your voice like a promise, of valleys where the fog itself seems to recognize you. In a world rapidly forgetting slowness, Icelanders choose to remember, to pause, to listen, not because it is fashionable, but because that is what the land demands. Here, life is never disconnected from death, nor joy from hardship. The volcano that destroys is the same one that creates. The glacier that carves valleys also feeds rivers. The darkness that swallows months also gives birth to poems and songs no sunlit world could ever write. And through it all, the Icelanders induce to born, poetic, grounded, and kind. You see it in the weathered hands of a sheep farmer who still mends fences by touch, in the schoolteacher who ends class with a verse of ancient poetry, in the barista who knows the geology of every volcano on the island, not because she must but because she wants to, because knowing the land is knowing yourself. So the story doesn't end, it lingers. It continues in the steam rising from a hot spring in the middle of nowhere, in the hum of a lullaby sung to a child with eyes wide open to northern lights, in the footsteps left in snow by someone walking home with their head bowed, not from cold but from reverence. Icelanders don't claim to be a perfect people. They claim to be part of something older than themselves. And maybe, in that, there is a lesson for us all. Far out in the Atlantic, seemingly adrift on its own tectonic raft, Iceland does not shout for attention, and yet the world continues to turn its gaze toward it. In the modern age, where nations jostle for dominance through spectacle, Iceland's quiet integrity draws admiration. Its people do not seek to dominate headlines, but they make waves in quieter ways, by leading the charge in gender equality, by running on near-to-toe renewable energy, by crafting literature and art that stirs far beyond their borders. What began as a land of survivors carving farms into lava rock, writing poems by candlelight, fishing in wooden boats under 1,000 stars, has become one of the world's most forward-thinking societies. But Icelanders don't see these things as accomplishments to boast about. They see them as natural extensions of respect. For the land, for each other, and for time, the island teaches a kind of patience the modern world often forgets. The patience to watch the skies for weather before making a plan. The patience to wait months for the return of the sun. The patience to sit with a story until it tells you something you didn't expect. Icelanders know that not everything needs to be immediate. Some things need to be earned by enduring, by listening, by staying. Their wisdom is quiet, often unspoken, passed in a glance across a hot spring, in a nod at the harbor, in a story half told that invites you to ask for more. They are not performative, they are present. And maybe that is Iceland's greatest offering to the world, not its volcanoes, not its otherworldly beauty, not even its enviable way of life, but its reminder that we, too, can live more deliberately. That we can build communities where heritage matters, that we can create art without apology, that we can endure darkness, not by denying it but by lighting one another's way through it. Iceland, in all its windblown, glacier-scraped truth, is a place of elemental honesty, and its people rooted, resilient, radiant are its stew. So when the northern lights dance across the sky, when steam curls from a mountaintop spring, when a sheepdog stands watch beneath a rising sun after months of knit, is not the end of the story. It is just another breath in a land that has been breathing for 1,000 years. Icelanders are simply listening. And now so are we. At first glance, Iceland seems almost otherworldly, a landscape born from fire and ice, where glaciers loom over volcanic plains and the wind never stops speaking. But nestled within this dramatic geography are the people who call it home. The Icelanders, their way of life is unlike anywhere else on Earth, neither fast nor loud. It is instead defined by rhythm, resilience, and relationship with nature, with history, and with each other. Life here is built around adaptation. For more than 1,000 years, Icelanders have endured brutal winters, isolation, and geological chaos, not with resistance, but with quiet ingenuity. They live in harmony with unpredictability, guided by the philosophy that nature is not to be conquered, but respected. This mindset weaves into every part of daily life, creating a culture of self-reliance soft by deep communal trust. In Reykjavik, the capital, this philosophy manifests in balance. A vibrant city of art galleries, music venues, and tech startups stands just a short walk from quiet geothermal pools and black sand beaches. The pace of life is calm, unhurried, and grounded in values that prioritize well-being over productivity. Icelanders do not live to work. They work to live. Most businesses close early on Fridays. Parents are encouraged to leave work on time to pick up their children. Maternity and paternity leaves are generous. Wellness is not sold as luxury, it's built into the system. And above all, trust is high. Children play unsupervised in public parks. It's common to leave strollers outside with sleeping babies. and honesty boxes still exist on rural farms. This sense of trust isn't naive, it's cultural infrastructure. It grows from a small population, a shared history, and the collective knowledge that, on an island in the North Atlantic, you have to depend on each other. Beyond the city limits, the rhythm of life slows even further. In the countryside, where wide fields stretch toward distant glaciers and small houses cling to hillside stir, Icelandic lifestyle is shaped by simplicity, seasonality, and connection to the land. Many families still maintain a close relationship with farming, even if only part-time. Sheep farming, in particular, is deeply embedded in Icelandic identity. The animals roam freely across the highlands during summer and are herded back in autumn in a collective event known as this. Isn't just an agricultural task, it's a national ritual. Entire communities ride on horseback, round up the animals together, and gather afterward for traditional food, music, and storytelling. In rural Iceland, work and life are not separated. One might tend sheep in the morning, collect eggs from backyard hens, and later head indoors to write a novel or run a small online business. Internet access is nearly universal, even in the most remote valleys, making it possible for people to remain connected to the modern world without leaving their ancestral land. And yet, despite the technology, life is still tuned to the natural clock. Weather dictates plans. Storms mean postponement. Long summer days stretch into midnight walks, while winter nights invite quiet reading and introspection. There is no fight against the seasons, only a graceful coexistence with them. Inside Icelandic homes, there is a quiet warmth that mirrors the geothermal heat flowing beneath their floors. The family unit is central to Icelandic life. Though it is rarely rigid or traditional in structure, many couples cohabit and raise children without ever marrying, and single-parent households are common and socially accepted. What matters most is presence and participation. Parents, regardless of gender, are deeply involved in their children's lives. Fathers often take extended paternity leave, and mothers are not expected to sacrifice careers to raise a family. Children are raised with an emphasis on independence. From a young age, they're encouraged to explore the world on their own terms, walking to school alone, playing outdoors in all weather, and learning through discovery rather than strict discipline. Icelandic education reflects this ethos. Schools are child-centered, informal, and focused on creativity and critical thinking. There are few uniforms, few tests, and lots of outdoor time. Teachers are addressed by their first names, and classrooms often resemble collaborative studios rather than strict lecture halls. Reading is sacred. Books are gifted during holidays, discussed over dinner, and exchanged like currency. Most Icelandic children grow up reading the same ancient sagas their ancestors did, but they're also exposed to contemporary global literature and encouraged to write their own stories. From this foundation grows a generation that is both rooted and open-minded, grounded in Icelandic values, but ready to meet the world. Community is the invisible thread that weaves Icelandic life together. While the population is small, around 380,000 people, the sense of collective identity is remarkably strong. In towns and villages, people greet each other by name. It's not uncommon to know someone's grandparents, their profession, and the exact farm they came from, even if you've never met them before. But this intimacy does not feel intrusive, part of the culture's strength. Icelanders understand that in a land this remote, where weather can close roads for days, and nature offers no guarantees, connection is a form of survival. Social life is both casual and inclusive. Rather than grand events, it revolves around simple gatherings, potluck dinners, storytelling nights, hot spring. The local swimming pool is perhaps the most iconic center of social life. Not just a place to swim, it's where people of all ages soak in hot geothermal waters, discuss politics, debate literature, exchange local news, or sit in comfortable silence. These communal pools are found in nearly every town, and they embody the Icelandic value of samvera, being together, sharing time without the need for structure or purpose. It's in these pools that local disputes are settled, neighbors reconnect after storms, and even business deals are sometimes made shirtless in the steam. Despite the long winters, Icelanders do not hibernate. Instead, they embrace the darkness with intention. Leisure time is rich and layered. Many play music, write poetry, knit, or study new subjects for the sheer joy of it. Indoor sports like handball and volleyball thrive, and in rural areas, horseback riding and skiing remain beloved pastimes. In cities like Anakarere, art is everywhere, from murals to pop-up galleries to poetry readings in bars. The cultural output per capita is astonishing. There's a joke that every Icelander is either a musician, a published author, or both, and it's often true. Creative expression is not reserved for the elite. It's something people do alongside everyday life. A fisherman writes haiku, a farmer sings folk songs, a teenager experiments with electronic music on a laptop between chores. This creative pulse is not a rebellion against Iceland's isolation, it's a response to it. Where others might feel loneliness, Icelanders create connection. Where others might feel boredom, they cultivate beauty. And all of this happens without pretense. There's little concern for fame or competition. The joy lies in the doing, in the gathering, the sharing, the making of meaning together. And so, even in the depths of winter, even on the smallest of islands, in the middle of the North Atlantic, the light never really goes out. To understand the Icelandic way of living, one must first understand that nature is not a backdrop. Hyrit is the main character. They negotiate with it. They build their lives beside volcanoes, on shifting tectonic plates, in the shadow of glaciers that breathe and move. Nature is respected as a living force, unpredictable and when a volcano erupts, when a river floods, or when the northern lights streak across the sky, the response is not fear or all but familiarity. It is a relationship built over generations. This deep bond influences everything from architecture to agriculture. Houses are built low to the ground, with turf roofs or reinforced walls to resist wind. Many farms are powered by geothermal heat tapped from beneath their very foundations. Energy is clean, abundant, and local. Nearly all of Iceland's electricity comes from renewable sources. Hydro and geothermal. Even in cities, people walk or cycle year-round, and plastic use is declining rapidly. Recycling is second nature. Young children grow up sorting waste into 4 categories. Environmental awareness is not a trend. In Iceland, it is a quiet, collective responsibility. Whether it's harvesting berries without stripping the soil, respecting bird nesting cliffs, or rerouting roads to avoid elves, Icelanders have developed a lifestyle that adapts to nature instead of trying to bend it to their will. Life in Iceland is inseparable from the rhythm of light. The island's tilt beneath the Arctic Circle gives its people a yearly cycle few others experience. Months of long, dark winter nights, followed by a near-endless summer sun. These shifting seasons shape not just the environment, but the Icelandic mind and spirit. In the depths of winter, darkness may stretch 20 hours or more. The sun, when it rises, barely skims the horizon, casting everything in a low golden light, then disappearing again. But instead of resisting the darkness, Icelanders prepare for it with reverence and creativity. Homes are designed to hold warmth, both physical and emotional. Candlelight, string lights, and lamps with soft yellow bulbs fill every window. There is a strong culture of indoor coziness, or where people gather around books, board games, movies, knitting projects, or simply quiet conversation over hot soup. Winter isn't viewed as an inconvenience, it's a time to reflect, to slow down, to reconnect with family, friends, and self. Seasonal depression is acknowledged, but rarely stigmatized. Many take daily walks in the brief daylight, practice cold plunges in icy rivers, or soak in hot springs under snowy skies. Mental health care is freely available, and resilience is viewed as a communal effort, not an individual burden. And so, despite the darkness, life continues with steadiness and intention. It is not a season of absence, it's a season of inner light. Then comes the sun, slowly at first, then all at once, spring arrives with a sense of soft urgency. Ice cracks, birds return, and the moss turns an impossibly bright green. But it is summer that transforms Iceland entirely. With nearly 24 hours of daylight from May to July, the country bursts into movement. Sleep becomes optional. People hike late into the night, plant gardens that grow in fast forward, camp beside glaciers, or play music in backyards until the early hours without ever needing a lamp. The return of the sun is not taken for granted. It is cherished, chased, and celebrated in the simplest of ways. Bonfires along the coast, long walks after midnight, reading by natural light at 2 a.m. Festivals spring up across the country, from lively to remote village gatherings where entire communities dance under a golden sky that never sets. And yet, even in all this brightness, Icelanders carry a quietness within them. Rhythm formed by years of listening to winter. They do not overindulge in the light, nor fear its loss. Instead, they absorb it, storing its energy for the next long night. This deep seasonal awareness of giving into stillness when needed and bursting into action when possible is one of the truest reflections of the Icelandic way of life. They do not fight the cycle, they live it. To be Icelandic is to live with the weight and wonder of one's ancestry, not just as a story, but as a presence. While Iceland has rapidly modernized over the past century, its people carry an unbroken cultural thread that stretches back to the first settlers who arrived in 874 AD. These Norse men and women sailed west in search of land and freedom, landing on the desolate, volcanic shores of what would become Iceland. What they found was a place of beauty and brutality, a land that offered nothing, and yet they stayed building turf homes, growing barley in ash-rich soil, raising sheep that still roam the hills today. The sagas, they wrote epic tales of betrayal, love, law, and blood are not just literature, they're the genetic memory of the nation. Every Icelander learns them. In school, children don't just memorize historical dates. They read the sagas aloud, they visit the places named in the stories, they walk the same fields, cross the same rivers. This continuity forms the core of Icelandic identity. Modern Icelanders may dress in sleek Scandinavian fashion, work in biotech labs, or compose avant-garde music, but many can also recite lines written over 800 years ago, and they feel no contradiction in that. The past is not romanticized, it's carried. Traditions, even those that seem whimsical to outsiders, are expressions of this inheritance. The belief in hidden people who live in rocks and hills is still quietly held by many. Roads have been rerouted to avoid disturbing suspected elf dwellings. New buildings are blessed Travelers often leave small offerings in the wilderness. Whether taken literally or as a metaphor for respect toward nature, these customs endure. Then there's the annual, a midwinter feast that features dishes from the days when preservation meant survival. Fermented shark, pickled lambs, head, blood pudding, and dried fish, all served with a healthy pour of the local While not everyone enjoys the flavors, most Icelanders embrace the tradition because it reminds them of where they came from. Similarly, the National Day on June 17th isn't just a civic celebration, it marks independence. Yes, but more than that, it celebrates cultural resilience. It's a reminder that this small island, with its isolated villages and volcanic temperament, has maintained a language, a democratic parliament, and a literary canon for over a millennium without losing itself in the tide of global influence. Even the Icelandic naming system reflects a different worldview. Instead of family surnames, people are named after their parents or It's a living genealogy, a quiet statement of belonging that ties individuals directly to family rather than distant ancestral lines. There is no hierarchy built into names. Icelandic phone books are alphabetized by first names, and politicians, celebrities, and everyday citizens are all addressed equally. This sense of equality permeates every layer of society, from the famously casual workplaces to the high levels of gender parity in politics and education. In Iceland, status matters far less than contribution. What binds people together is not wealth, but participation, singing in the choir, helping during lambing season, joining the town theatre, sharing knowledge, raising children. And yet, despite the strength of their traditions, Icelanders are not frozen in time. They are forward-facing early adopters of technology, pioneers in renewable energy, and leaders in creative industries. But what makes their progress unique is the way it is anchored to memory. Innovation is not a rupture from the past, it is its extension. Data centers now hum beneath old lava fields, drawing power from the same geothermal energy that once heated Viking baths. Coders write code in the same towns where fishermen mend nets. Folk music is sampled into electronic beats. Modern novels echo saga structure. This ability to evolve without abandoning identity is perhaps Iceland's greatest cultural triumph. It allows them to live in both centuries at once, to be ancient and modern, remote and connected, stoic and expressive. So when you meet an Icelander, whether in a cafe, a fishing village in the West Fjords, or a mossy valley near Senfellscale, you're meeting a people who remember, who read the land as text, who greet the wind with familiarity, and who know that survival is not just a matter of strength but of story. Their way of living is not just a lifestyle, it is a lineage. Education in Iceland is not merely a formal institution, it is a cultural cornerstone, deeply tied to the nation's values of equality, creativity, and lifelong learning. From the earliest years, Icelandic children are raised in an environment that emphasizes exploration over competition, curiosity over conformity. The educational system begins with play school, which is available to children from age 1 to 6. These are not daycares in the traditional sense, but structured early learning environments where children are encouraged to discover through play, storytelling, outdoor activity, and social interaction. Emphasis is placed on independence and imagination. Children are taught to dress themselves, take part in group decisions, and spend time outdoors, regardless of the weather. There is no pressure for early academics, rather. The belief is that strong social and emotional development lays the foundation for lifelong learning. Compulsory education spans from ages 6 to 16 and is known as these schools are inclusive by design. There are no private elementary schools, and all children, regardless of ability, socioeconomic background, or need attend the same schools. Classrooms are casual and collaborative. Teachers are addressed by their first names, and students are encouraged to participate in discussions, not just absorb information. There is a strong focus on reading, writing, and Icelandic language preservation, but also on creative subjects like music, visual arts, drama, and design. Testing is minimal, and grades are rarely emphasized in early years. Instead, student progress is measured through dialogue between teachers, students, and parents. School days are relatively short, homework is light, and recess is long because the Icelandic philosophy prioritizes balanced, happy learners over overworked children. After students move into upper secondary school from ages 16 to 20, which is comparable to high school but with more flexibility, students choose tracks based on interests. Academic preparation for university, vocational programs like carpentry or nursing or creative arts. This phase is non-compulsory but widely attended, and it remains free of tuition. There is a high degree of student autonomy. Many take responsibility for their own schedules, course selection, and pace of completion. The system trusts young people to take ownership of their learning, and most rise to the challenge. For those pursuing higher education, Iceland offers universities that are publicly funded, tuition-free for residents, and open to international students as well. The University of Iceland, founded in 1911, remains the largest and most prestigious, but numerous smaller institutions specialize in arts, technology, marine science, and renewable energy. But education in Iceland doesn't end with degrees. Lifelong learning is deeply ingrained in the culture. Adult education centers, online courses, and workplace learning programs are widely available and often subsidized. Whether it's learning a new language at age 50 or taking a sewing class at 70, education is seen not as a phase of life but a continuous journey. This reflects a national belief that informed citizens are the backbone of a strong democracy. Iceland's remarkably high literacy rate, nearly 100%, is not just a statistical pride, it is part of daily life. People read for pleasure, participate in debates, and value informed conversation. Every Icelander grows up knowing that stories matter because they are raised in a land where education is not about conformity, but about becoming fully human. In Icelandic schools, the atmosphere feels more like a community than a system. Classrooms are informal, filled with natural light, and often surrounded by nature. It is not unusual for lessons to be held outside even in cold weather, because Icelanders believe that fresh air and nature aren't distractions, they're part of learning. Teachers don't lecture from podiums or enforce silence. Instead, they act as guides, encouraging discussion, creative thinking, and self-expression. Mutual respect is the foundation. Students are trusted from a young age, and in return, they learn to take responsibility for their work, their voice, and their role in society. There is little to no dress code, minimal hierarchy, and a sense of emotional safety that allows students to develop confidence without fear of failure. Mistakes are not punished but explored. One striking feature of the Icelandic educational ethos is its deep integration of cultural identity. Students learn not just history, but saga literature, medieval Icelandic epics, filled with moral complexity, strong characters, and ancestral relevance. They don't just read them. They debate them, act them out, even reinterpret them through modern lenses. Creative expression is not considered an extracurricular, it's central. Art, music, storytelling, and even knitting and crafts are integrated into school life. In many schools, students are taught how to compose songs, publish short books, or curate community exhibitions. This investment in creativity has led to Iceland's disproportionately large number of writers, musicians, and artists, and a cultural confidence that starts young. School lunches reflect these values. 2. Meals are nutritious, locally sourced when possible, and served with the belief that eating together teaches social values. Many schools make a point of reducing food waste, composting, or involving students in gardening projects. Discipline is handled without fear-based systems. Instead, problems are discussed openly between students, teachers, and sometimes even peer councils. Anti-bullying programs are standard, and emotional well-being is part of the curriculum. Mental health is not treated as a taboo, and schools often have access to counselors or trained wellness staff. Education is not viewed as a race to compete, but as a path to becoming a responsible, thoughtful citizen of the community. As students grow older, they're encouraged to contribute beyond academics. Volunteer programs, environmental projects, and even local governance initiatives are part of many upper secondary experiences. Young people are trusted to make real decisions about school policy, event planning, or budget distribution. This builds not only maturity, but a sense of ownership and civic participation. By the time they graduate, most Icelandic youth are not just knowledgeable, they're equipped with practical tools, empathy, and cultural fluency. And because of this, whether they go into marine biology, music, politics, or sheep farming, they do so with a sense of grounded pride and a willingness to innovate without forgetting where they come from. As Icelanders transition from school into adulthood, they carry with them the same values that shaped their childhood: autonomy, balance, and trust. The Icelandic work culture reflects this at every level. It is practical. Full-time work weeks average around 37 to 40 hours, but overtime is rare and often discouraged. The prevailing mindset is simple. Work is a part of life, not the definition of it. Employers trust employees to manage their tasks independently, and micromanagement is uncommon. Hierarchies exist, but are flat. Whether in a government office or a high-tech startup, the CEO might sit beside interns and join them for coffee breaks. Titles are downplayed. First names are used by everyone. Formal dress codes are unusual. What matters more than status or suits is participation and contribution. A strong social contract supports this approach. Maternity and paternity leave are generous and shared almost equally between parents. Parents of young children often leave work early to pick them up, and no one questions it. Icelandic law protects work-life balance, and there is a national understanding that rest, health, and family come first. This is not laziness, it is sustainability, because Icelanders know what long winters and geographical isolation can do to mental health. They invest in prevention rather than burnout. Breaks are encouraged. Flexibility is respected. If someone needs to spend time with a sick parent or retreat into the countryside for a few days of solitude, it's not seen as weakness, it's seen as wisdom. Leisure time is not wasted, it's woven into life. Icelanders read, create, and get outdoors. After a workday, it's common to see someone on a horseback ride at a swimming pool with friends, or hiking a nearby mountain before dinner. Many pursue passions on the side. A government worker might also be a published poet. A fisherman might compose music. A librarian might run a sheep farm on weekends. These overlapping lives are not only accepted, they're encouraged. Icelanders are deeply multifaceted people, shaped by a culture that sees productivity not in endless hours, but in meaningful output. And beneath all of this lies trust. A small population breeds accountability. You might share a hot spring with your dentist, or stand behind a cabinet minister at the supermarket. The boundaries between personal and professional blur, not in a stressful way, but in a communal one. This closeness creates a sense of shared purpose. Whether you're working on a fishing boat, in a geothermal plant, or teaching in a remote town, you're recontributing to the functioning of something bigger than yourself. A society that believes everyone's time matters and that no job is more important than a life well lived. In recent decades, Iceland has experienced a dramatic shift, one that swept in not through glaciers or eruptions, but through airports. Once considered an isolated island in the North Atlantic, known mostly to geologists and saga scholars, Iceland became one of the world's most sought-after travel destinations almost overnight. With the rise of low-cost flights, Instagram-famous landscapes, and a hunger for wild, untouched beauty, tourism surged, bringing over 2 million annual visitors to a country with fewer than 400,000 residents. This boom, while economically beneficial, has profoundly impacted the Icelandic way of life. In towns like Vikhofen and the once quiet rhythms of fishing and farming have given way to the buzz of tour buses, hotels, and gift shops. What was once sacred local knowledge, how to walk across moss without damaging it, when to cross a glacier safely, which waterfall is best viewed at dusk, has become commercialized, sometimes carelessly consumed, and yet Icelanders have responded, not with resentment, but with reflection. Many recognize that tourism provides vital income, keeps rural communities alive, and allows them to share the natural wonders they deeply love. But they are also fiercely protective of their environment, which is fragile and slow to heal, protective of their traditions, which risk being diluted by mass attention, and protective of their peace, which is built not on performance, but on presence. As a result, the Icelandic approach to tourism has evolved into a balancing act. Locals, often quietly, lead by example, posting signs not to step on moss, creating respectful hiking routes, offering small-scale, sustainable experiences instead of flashy attractions. Tour companies are increasingly run by Icelanders who weave cultural education into the journey, explaining geothermal systems or sharing the history behind each. In Reykjavik, you'll still find where locals meet for coffee and poetry readings, even if tourists now fill many seats. But Icelanders don't retreat from visibility, they adapt without losing their center. Many see tourism as a chance to teach the world, not just about waterfalls and volcanoes, but about values. How to live with the land, not just pass through it. How to listen before taking. How to be still before capturing. There is a quiet hope that visitors want to just remember Iceland's landscapes, but its spirit. And so, while the island grows busier, the Icelanders themselves remain constant, generous with their land, proud of their culture, and gently reminding us that true discovery is never just about the view, it is about how we walk upon the world. As Iceland's global visibility grows, so too does the pressure to maintain authenticity in the face of rapid development. The influx of tourists has created both opportunities and challenges. In once quiet villages, locals now run cozy guest houses, glacier tours, and craft markets that support families. Young Icelanders, who may have once moved to for work, are returning to rural towns to start businesses rooted in nature and tradition. In that way, tourism has helped reverse the outmigration of past generations. But the boom hasn't come without cost. Natural sites like the Blue Lagoon and Gullfoss waterfall, once visited mostly by Icelanders, are now filled with visitors nearly every hour of the day. Some remote trails have been eroded by careless foot traffic. Sacred sites, ancient lava fields, elf or sheep paws are occasionally disrespected by those unaware of their cultural or ecological importance. To address this, Icelanders are taking a proactive stance. National parks and tourist sites are managed with increasing care. Rangers and volunteers educate visitors about fragile mass, volcanic hazards, and the importance of staying on marked paths. New infrastructure, wooden walkways, composting toilets, designated parking aims to reduce environmental impact without disrupting the landscape. Locals also push back in subtle ways. Artists create installations that critique over. Farmers post handmade signs, reminding hikers to close gates. Prioritize Icelandic ingredients and traditional recipes over Instagram-driven trends. In schools, children are taught both to be proud of their heritage and to become stewards of their homeland. The Icelandic Tourism Board encourages a campaign called Crew for Darmen, which gently educates travelers not just about where to go but how to behave with respect and responsibility. What's remarkable is how Icelanders are shaping tourism in their own image, not as a performance for outsiders, but as a cultural exchange rooted in mutual respect. Instead of building massive resorts, they invest in locally owned lodges and sustainable guest houses. Instead of commercializing every corner, they preserve silence and simplicity. And while some locals understandably express fatigue with the constant presence of visitors, most remain open, kind, and willing to share so long as the exchange is real. Icelanders do not sell a fantasy of wilderness. They invite you into their home, their stories, and their pace. And in doing so, they are not just surviving tourism, they are reshaping it into something slower, wiser, and more human. Food in Iceland has always been about survival. First flavor came later. In a country where winters are long, growing seasons short, and the sea often more generous than the soil, traditional Icelandic cuisine is a reflection of resilience. Yet today, as Iceland becomes a global destination, its food culture is transforming not by abandoning its roots, but by elevating them. Walk through a Reykjavik market, and you'll find fermented shark sold beside delicate skyr-infused pastries. Local chefs now blend ancient preservation techniques with modern flair, creating a cuisine that's uniquely Icelandic and unapologetically honest. Restaurants showcase ingredients once considered humble or harsh. Seabirds, moss, Arctic char, dried fish, lamb smoked over birchwood. Tourists may try these out of curiosity, but for Icelanders, it's not novelty, it's memory, it's identity. A slice of dark rye bread traditionally baked in geothermal earth isn't just a dish, it's a connection to grandparents, to the volcanic land, to time itself. Despite the influx of international cuisine and imported goods, many Icelanders still shop at local fish markets, grow herbs in their windowsills, and preserve berries, rhubarb, or dandelions harvested in summer. Meals are simple and seasonal. Lamb is prized not only because it's flavorful, but because Icelandic sheep roam wild across the highlands for months, feeding on moss and heather, their meat infused with the landscape itself. Fish is central court, fresh, dried for winter, or grilled simply with salt and butter. Skyr, a thick, tangy dairy product consumed since the Viking Age, remains a staple at breakfast, lunch, or dessert. And perhaps most telling, fast food never truly replaced the home-cooked meal. Even busy families still gather for Sunnudagsamatur Sunday dinnerware. Roast lamb, potatoes, and gravy are shared with grandparents and cousins in small kitchens warmed by geothermal heat. Icelanders are proud of their food, not because it's fancy, but because it tells the truth. It reflects the land's limitations and its quiet abundance. And even as gourmet tourism grows, food tours, tasting menus, cooking classes, Icelanders are careful to keep their culinary soul grounded. Recipes are passed down, not archived. Elders still teach children how to make kleiner or plockfisker, just as their parents once did. And while some ingredients are being reinvented for modern tastes, the values behind them remain unchanged. Eat what the land gives. Waste nothing. Cook with patience and share with others. In this way, Icelandic food isn't just nourishment. It's a declaration of who they are and what they choose to preserve, no matter how fast the world outside moves. Iceland is considered one of the nicest countries in the world, not just because of its breathtaking landscapes, but because of the way its people live in harmony with their environment and one another. Surrounded by glaciers, volcanoes, hot springs, and black sand beaches, Iceland's natural beauty is both surreal and deeply respected. The air is clean, the water is some of the purest on Earth, and nearly all of the country's electricity comes from renewable sources like geothermal and hydropower. But beyond its landscapes, what truly makes Iceland special is its society. It's one of the safest countries in the world, with virtually no violent crime and a strong sense of trust among its citizens. People leave their doors unlocked, and children walk to school alone. Icelanders enjoy a high quality of life, supported by free healthcare, excellent education, gender equality, and strong environmental policies. Their culture values creativity, storytelling, and community. More books are published per capita here than anywhere else. Even in long winters and harsh weather, Icelanders remain resilient, finding joy in simple pleasures, soaking in hot springs, gathering with friends, or reading by candlelight. In Iceland, the pace of life is slower, the priorities clearer, and the connection between people and nature stronger than in most modern societies. It's not just a beautiful country, it's a deeply thoughtful, sustainable, and welcoming way of life. What also makes Iceland a remarkable country is the unique mindset of its people, rooted in humility, independence, and deep respect for nature. In a land where the weather can shift from calm to brutal in minutes, Icelanders have learned not to fight nature, but to live alongside it. This has shaped a culture of adaptability and calm resilience. People here don't panic when a volcano erupts or a storm rolls in. They prepare, adapt, and carry on. This outlook filters into everyday life, creating a society that values steadiness over stress, simplicity over excess. Community support plays a huge role in maintaining emotional well-being, whether in a tiny fishing village or the capital city. Of people look out for each other, not in a dramatic or performative way, but as a quiet social instinct. The healthcare system, which is publicly funded and accessible to all, reflects this shared responsibility for well-being. Despite its small population, Iceland is incredibly progressive. Gender equality is not just a policy, but a norm. And Iceland consistently ranks as one of the best places in the world for women. LGBTQ+ rights are fully recognized and protected. Education is free, and learning is treated as a lifelong pursuit. There's no obsession with elite universities or status. Instead, knowledge and curiosity are valued for their own sake. Arts and culture are integrated into daily life, not reserved for special occasions. People of all ages sing, write, paint, or perform not for fame, but for expression and connection. In Iceland, a teacher might also be a folk singer. A farmer might publish poetry. This blending of roles reflects a society that doesn't define people by profession, but by how they contribute to the community. Even tourism, which has grown rapidly in recent years, is managed with care. Icelanders are proud to share their land, but are deeply protective of it. Sustainable travel is encouraged, and visitors are gently taught to respect both the environment and the cultural traditions. Through it all, Iceland remains true to itself, steadfast, open, and deeply human. It's a country where beauty is everywhere, not only in the scenery, but in the way people live with intention, integrity, and heart, ChatGPT said. Another reason Iceland is so admired is its strong national identity rooted not in prideful nationalism, but in cultural memory and shared experience. Despite being a small island nation, Icelanders have preserved their language, literature, and customs for over 1,000 years. The Icelandic language, virtually unchanged since the Viking Age, connects modern citizens directly to their ancestors. Children read ancient sagas in school, not as dusty history, but as living stories that still resonate with modern values: honor, courage, wit, and resilience. This deep respect for heritage creates a sense of continuity and belonging that many larger, more globalized nations have lost. Icelanders know where they come from, and that knowledge quietly shapes how they move forward. In everyday life, this connection to the past blends seamlessly with a forward-thinking mindset. Iceland is a leader in green energy, gender equality, and social innovation. But even amid modern advancements, fiber optic internet in remote villages, cutting-edge research in geothermal energy, there's no rush to erase the old ways. Many Icelanders still knit by hand, preserve food with traditional methods, and gather for community storytelling or music nights. Technology is used as a tool, not a distraction. The modern and the ancient coexist in harmony, because Icelanders understand that progress doesn't mean abandoning your roots, it means growing from them. Perhaps one of the most telling aspects of Icelandic life is their attitude toward fame and success. In a culture this small, where everyone knows someone who knows you, there's little room for arrogance. Celebrities, politicians, and artists live side by side with everyone else, standing in line at the same grocery stores, soaking in the same hot springs. Fame isn't worshipped, it's regarded with humility. What matters more is character, creativity, and kindness. That sense of social equality fosters a community where people feel seen, not for what they have, but for who they are. It is one of the many quiet reasons Iceland feels not just like a beautiful place, but like a truly good one, ChatGPT said. Adding further to what makes Iceland such a genuinely admirable country is its unique relationship with solitude, silence, and space. Unlike more crowded nations, Iceland offers its people physical and mental room to breathe. There is no urban sprawl, no aggressive pace, no pressure to constantly compete or consume. Instead, Icelanders embrace slowness as a form of wisdom. Time is taken to enjoy a cup of coffee, to walk by the sea, or to sit quietly in a geothermal hot spring and simply listen to the wind, to the birds, to the land itself. In this quiet, many Icelanders find clarity. Their lives are not shaped by urgency, but by awareness. Even in the capital city, the energy feels calm, safe, and everything from the design of neighborhoods to the work schedules encourages a life with balance, not burnout. This appreciation for silence and nature also nurtures a remarkable creativity. Iceland has become globally recognized for its music, art, and literature, not because it chases global trends, but because it stays authentic. Artists like Björk, Sigga, and of Monsters and Men didn't try to copy the outside world, they created something completely their own. Inspired by glaciers, isolation, myths, and emotion, Icelanders believe in self-expression, not as a luxury, but as a basic part of being alive. Whether it is a teenager producing electronic music from their bedroom in Akureyri, or a fisherman painting canvases in the West, creativity flows freely through daily life. And what's truly inspiring is how this creativity is supported not only through funding and education, but through a culture that encourages people to try, to make, to share, and to fail without shame. Finally, one of the most beautiful reasons Iceland is such a nice country is its quiet generosity. Visitors often note how Icelanders are welcoming, helpful, and sincere without being overly performative. Hospitality is offered humbly, an invitation to a family meal, a tip on where to find the best view, a local explaining the meaning behind a place name. There's a national character defined by modesty and warmth, what Icelanders call let. They don't boast about their country, but they care deeply for it. And they want you to care too, not just about what you see, but how you behave, what you learn, and how you leave it behind. In a world that often rewards noise, speed, and self-promotion, Iceland stands as a rare example of a country that thrives on quiet strength, shared purpose, and genuine human dignity. Living in Iceland offers breathtaking natural beauty, safety, and a strong social system, but it comes at a price. The cost of living is high, particularly in and other urban centers, due to the country's isolation and dependence on imported goods. Everyday essentials like groceries, clothing, electronics, and restaurant meals tend to be significantly more expensive than in mainland Europe or North America. Eating out is a luxury for many. Even a simple meal at a casual restaurant can cost more than $20 US, and a cappuccino often runs between $4 to $6 US. Rent is also costly, especially in the capital, where a one-bedroom apartment in the city center can range from $1,200 to $2,000 per month. Utilities, internet, and mobile plans are relatively affordable thanks to renewable energy, but buying a car or gasoline is expensive. Despite the high costs, most Icelanders enjoy a decent quality of life. Because wages are relatively high, education and healthcare are free or heavily subsidized, and unemployment is low. Iceland's strong safety net, generous parental leave, and public support systems help offset the financial pressure. While the cost of living can be a shock for foreigners or tourists, locals manage through a combination of government support, community-centered lifestyles, and a cultural preference for modesty and sustainability over consumerism. While Iceland is undoubtedly expensive, Icelanders have adapted their lifestyle in ways that soften the financial impact. One major reason for the high cost is that much of the food, clothing, electronics, and manufactured goods must be imported, adding shipping and tax costs to nearly everything. A trip to the grocery store can surprise newcomers. A liter of milk, a loaf of bread, or a dozen eggs cost significantly more than in many other countries. Fresh fruits and vegetables are also pricey, especially in winter, unless grown locally in greenhouses. However, many Icelanders save money by cooking at home, relying on locally sourced fish, lamb, and dairy, and shopping at budget chains like. Eating out is typically reserved for special occasions rather than a daily routine. Housing is another major expense, especially in where demand far outpaces supply. Rents are high, and buying a home can be difficult for young people, unless they receive help from family. In contrast, housing in rural areas is much more affordable, which has led some Icelanders, especially families and remote workers, to settle outside the city and commute or work online. Public transportation is limited outside, so owning a car is often a necessity, despite the high fuel prices. However, the upside is that electricity and heating costs are lower than in many cold climate countries, thanks to the nation's abundant and cheap geothermal energy. Clothing and consumer goods also carry a hefty price tag. So many locals value durable, long-lasting purchases over fast fashion or gadgets. The culture in Iceland does not revolve around consumerism, which helps. People are more likely to repair, reuse, or share what they own than to constantly replace items. Children often wear second-hand winter gear passed down from siblings or neighbors, and many communities hold clothing swap events or use online marketplaces to recycle items. Despite the expenses, Icelanders receive strong social benefits that make daily life more manageable. Healthcare is free or low cost. Education, including university, is publicly funded, and childcare is subsidized. Parental leave is generous and shared between both parents. Taxes are high, but most citizens agree they're worth it for the peace of mind that comes with knowing they won't face ruin from medical bills or tuition fees. In fact, the balance of a strong welfare system, high wages, and a simple lifestyle is what allows many Icelanders to thrive despite the high costs around them. Compared to many other countries, the cost of living in Iceland can feel extremely, especially for tourists or new residents. A standard hotel room, for example, can cost $150, $300 per night, and renting a car or eating at restaurants quickly adds up. But for locals who earn higher than average salaries and receive substantial government support, the cost is better balanced. Most Icelanders earn enough to live comfortably, though not extravagantly, and the cultural mindset favors quality of life over material accumulation. There's little obsession with luxury brands or status symbols. Icelanders prioritize experiences, nature, community, and family, which don't always carry a price tag. For university students, life in Iceland can be surprisingly affordable. Tuition at public universities is very low, only around ISK 75,000 per year, and the government provides support for housing, transportation, and living costs through grants and loans. Many students live modestly, cook at home, and share flats to manage expenses. The same is true for young professionals just starting out. While rent and food are expensive, they benefit from stable jobs, free healthcare, and public services that prevent them from falling into deep debt or financial insecurity. In rural areas, housing is cheaper, and a simpler, nature-centered lifestyle helps reduce living costs further. Expats and foreign workers tend to feel the pressure more, especially if they're used to lower costs of living. Imported goods like electronics, cosmetics, or international snacks can cost double or triple what they would in other countries. But many who move to Iceland learn to adapt by embracing local habits, eating fish instead of imported meat, buying clothes from Icelandic thrift stores, traveling the country with public hot springs and camping gear, instead of staying in hotels. The slower, less consumer-driven pace of life in Iceland actually encourages mindfulness around spending, and despite the expenses, happiness levels remain high in Iceland, largely because basic needs are met and stress is lower. There's a strong sense of societal fairness. No one is wildly rich or visibly poor, and most people live similar lifestyles, regardless of profession. People don't measure success by wealth, but by personal contentment, work-life balance, and connection to nature and community. And while you won't find big shopping malls or luxury chains everywhere, you will find safety, education, access to healthcare, and clean air, things that money can't always buy elsewhere. One of the most striking things about Iceland is that even though everything from food to fuel costs more, the people rarely complain in the way you might expect. That's because Icelanders don't view money as the only measure of a good life. Their culture values balance over excess, community over competition, and well-being over wealth. Most Icelanders live in smaller, energy-efficient homes that are heated affordably by geothermal systems. They don't chase big cars or status-driven lifestyles. Instead, they invest in things that matter to them: their families, their health, their education, and their connection to nature. Even simple pleasures like soaking in a local hot pool, hiking near a glacier, or reading at home during a snowstorm bring genuine joy and cost next to nothing. The structure of Iceland's economy also softens the impact of high consumer prices. Wages are relatively strong, unions are active, and labor rights are taken seriously. Workers benefit from fair contracts, paid vacations, overtime protections, and a generally respectful employer-employee relationship. Many Icelanders work fewer hours than their international counterparts, and there's a national understanding that burnout and overwork are not badges of honor. This means people actually have time to enjoy their lives, to rest, to create, and to be with their families, something that offsets the financial burden of living in a high-cost country. Additionally, Iceland's high taxes are reinvested visibly and effectively. Citizens benefit from public health care, generous parental leave, quality education, road maintenance, environmental preservation, and even cultural funding. Icelanders may pay more in taxes than people in many other countries, but they also feel the return in their daily lives. There's a deep trust in public institutions, and a belief that when the whole country does well, everyone benefits, even in times of economic downturn, such as the 2008 banking crisis. Icelanders remained resilient and united, choosing reform and responsibility over blame and division. Social comparison and material pressure are also much lower in Iceland. It's a small country, and almost everyone knows someone who knows someone else. That familiarity fosters humility. People don't flaunt wealth, and it is perfectly normal for a university professor to bike to work, or for a celebrity to stand quietly in line at the bakery. This lack of class tension or visible inequality contributes to a more cohesive and relaxed society. And while Icelanders are proud of their country, they don't believe it's perfect. They openly discuss housing shortages, cost of living concerns, and the effects of tourism, but they do so with a sense of collective responsibility, not individual frustration. In essence, while Iceland may be financially expensive, it offers something rare: a society where quality of life is protected by design, not luck. A place where happiness is drawn, not from what you can buy, but from what you can share, preserve, and experience together. Iceland's economy is a study in balance, small, agile, and deeply intertwined with the natural world. Despite its remote location and modest population, Iceland has built an economic model that is both modern and uniquely its own. At its foundation lies the island's vast access to clean, renewable energy. Geothermal and hydropower generate nearly all of the nation's electricity, which has not only made Iceland one of the greenest countries in the world, but has attracted energy-intensive industries like aluminum smelting and data centers. But energy is only one part of the puzzle. The backbone of the Icelandic economy is still the sea. Fishing and fish processing remain among the largest export sectors, thanks to the country's strictly managed and sustainable fisheries. Icelanders have turned centuries of seafaring knowledge into a globally respected high-tech fishing industry that prioritizes both quality and long-term ecological health. Alongside this, tourism has emerged as a major force in recent years, with millions of visitors arriving annually to experience Iceland's raw landscapes and rich culture. While the tourism boom has created new jobs and revitalized rural communities, it has also raised questions about sustainability and infrastructure, leading the government and locals to push for slower, more thoughtful growth. Yet what truly distinguishes Iceland's economy is its resilience. In 2008, the country faced one of the most dramatic financial collapses in modern history. 3 major banks failed almost overnight, sending the economy into freefall. But Icelanders responded not with chaos, but with courage. Through democratic reforms, transparent investigations, and community-driven recovery efforts, the country stabilized within a few years, proving that small nations can rebound with integrity. Since then, Iceland has diversified its economy further, investing in tech, innovation, and creative industries. The film, music, gaming, and software sectors are growing, powered by a highly educated, multilingual population with strong digital literacy. Agriculture, while small, remains culturally significant. Sheep, dairy, and greenhouse farming are supported both for food security and cultural preservation. Unemployment remains low. Income inequality is modest by global standards, and labor unions work closely with government and industry to ensure fair wages and benefits. In daily life, the Icelandic economy supports a social model built on fairness and access. Taxes are high, but so is the return. Education, healthcare, parental leave, and pensions are all publicly supported. Small businesses thrive, and the country's emphasis on sustainability is not just environmental, it's economic. Icelanders value moderation over excess, local over mass-produced, and long-term well-being over short-term gains. This economic philosophy, grounded in both tradition and foresight, reflects the Icelandic character itself. Humble, resourceful, and always evolving. While Iceland's economy has strong traditional roots in fishing and farming, it is also remarkably forward-thinking, shaped by innovation, adaptability, and a deep awareness of environmental limits. Fishing still accounts for about 40% of exports, but it's not the kind of small-scale industry many imagine. Icelandic fishing companies use advanced satellite tracking, AI, and state-of-the-art vessels to ensure both efficiency and sustainability. Overfishing is considered a national taboo, and catch limits are scientifically managed by the government through a quota system. Balances economic needs with long-term ocean health. But Iceland has never been content to rely on a single industry. After the 2008 financial crisis, the country made a conscious decision to diversify. Tourism surged in response, drawing millions of visitors, eager to see the northern lights, explore glaciers, and bathe in hot springs. But that boom also revealed vulnerabilities: environmental strain, housing shortages, and seasonal job dependency. As a result, Iceland is now steering tourism toward quality over quantity, encouraging ecotourism, cultural immersion, and longer stays instead of rapid sightseeing. Meanwhile, new industries have quietly risen. The country's cheap, green energy has made it attractive for data centers, particularly for cryptocurrency mining and cloud computing operations that require large amounts of power. While controversial due to energy consumption, these industries are helping fund rural development and infrastructure. More promising, however, are Iceland's creative and knowledge sectors. In recent years, software development, biotechnology, gaming, and green innovation have Icelandic tech startups are often globally oriented from the beginning, thanks to the country's small domestic market, high English fluency, and digital connectivity. The government actively supports innovation through grants, tax incentives, and startup accelerators. Meanwhile, the cultural economy thrives as well. Literature, design, music, and film not only enrich daily life, but serve as exportable expressions of Icelandic identity. Agriculture, while limited by terrain and climate, is undergoing a quiet revolution. Greenhouse farming, powered by geothermal energy, allows Icelanders to grow tomatoes, cucumbers, and herbs. Farmers are experimenting with vertical agriculture, seaweed farming, and even the cultivation of specialty crops like wasabi and barley for craft beer. Iceland is also investing heavily in ocean research, marine biotechnology, and sustainable food systems, turning its natural resources into opportunities for clean innovation. Perhaps most impressively, all of this growth is pursued with sustainability in mind. Iceland has committed to being carbon neutral by 2040 and already ranks among the greenest economies in the world. Environmental protection isn't just policy, it's a cultural value. Economic decisions are increasingly evaluated, not just for profit, but for ecological and social impact. That's why Iceland's economy, though small, punches far above its weight. It's built not just on production and trade, but on principles and the belief that prosperity means more than wealth. It means balance, dignity, and a future that's livable for all. Despite the challenges of a small market and remote geography, entrepreneurship in Iceland is thriving not only in the capital, but across the countryside. Small businesses form the backbone of daily life, especially in rural communities, where resilience and creativity go hand in hand. In small fishing towns and farming villages, it is common to find a single person managing multiple roles. A sheep farmer who also runs a guest house, or a school teacher who sells handmade wool sweaters and baked goods at the weekend market. This multi-skilled, community-centered entrepreneurship is not just a necessity, it's a cultural habit. Icelanders are highly self-reliant, but they're also deeply interconnected. When one person succeeds, the community supports and benefits. There's a spirit of cooperation that allows small economies to function smoothly, even in isolated places. The government plays a key role in supporting this decentralized model. Through grants, low interest, rural development loans, and infrastructure investments, Iceland ensures that innovation doesn't only happen in programs like Kavena and regional business incubators help people, particularly women and young residents, start and scale small businesses. From boutique chocolate makers in the north to geothermal spa startups in the east, Icelandic entrepreneurs are finding ways to blend tradition with creativity. Tourism has opened new doors too. Locals now offer guided horseback rides, glacial hikes, and authentic home-cooked meals to curious travelers, not as tourist gimmicks, but as honest extensions of their everyday lives. Icelandic society also embraces the idea that a small business doesn't mean small impact. With a strong focus on local sourcing, circular economy practices, and environmental ethics, many Icelandic entrepreneurs design their services with purpose from the start. It's common to find farms that serve food grown entirely on site, clothing brands using only Icelandic wool, or skincare companies developing formulas with wild Arctic herbs. These businesses aren't built to scale fast or go global, they're built to last, to serve their neighbors, and to honor the landscape. And in Iceland, that's enough. The sense of ownership that comes with running a small business is deeply respected in Icelandic culture. It's not just about economic independence, it's about pride, identity, and rootedness. This value system, combined with national digital connectivity, low corruption, and strong institutions, has created a supportive ecosystem where even the smallest ideas have room to grow. Whether it's a fisherman creating a side hustle with drone photography, or a teenager opening an eco-conscious thrift shop, Iceland's economy makes space for people to shape their own path on their own terms, and often in service to their communities. At the heart of Iceland's economic success lies something often overlooked: the quiet strength of the family unit and the social systems that support it. In Iceland, raising a family is not viewed as a burden or a personal struggle, but as a shared societal responsibility. From the moment a child is born, families receive direct financial and structural support. Parental leave is among the most generous in the world, Both parents are entitled to several months of paid leave, and it's actively encouraged for fathers to take their full share. This not only reduces pressure on mothers, but helps build a culture of equal parenting, where both partners are involved from the beginning. Childcare is heavily subsidized, and most young children attend, which emphasizes creativity, social development, and outdoor play rather than rigid academics. As a result, even in a high-cost country, Icelanders are able to raise children without falling into crippling debt or sacrificing career stability. Family economics in Iceland are also marked by interdependence without hierarchy. Grandparents often live nearby and play a strong role in caregiving, passing down skills and knowledge rather than wealth. Multi-generational support is cultural. Not just financial. Families help each other fix homes, share cars, trade services, or pool money for big life events like weddings or house building. This creates a social safety net within the family, complementing the national one. It's not uncommon for siblings to co-invest in property, or for neighbors to co-op tools or land. In rural areas especially, this mutual reliance is a way of life, and it allows small communities to thrive, even with fewer formal resources. At the same time, financial independence is valued. From a young age, teenagers are encouraged to take on part-time work, whether on farms, in shops, or during summer tourism months. Many Icelanders, even in their teens and early 20s, start saving early or learn to manage personal finances with surprising maturity. There's a widespread attitude of modesty over materialism. Icelanders rarely flaunt wealth, and there's little pressure to keep up with anyone. Cars are kept for decades, clothes are passed down or thrifted. Homes are renovated slowly, and large weddings are often replaced with simple countryside celebrations. What matters is not showing wealth, but living well, and that usually means stability, family, time, and a strong connection to the land. Iceland's combination of state support, cultural norms, and practical community values allows families to weather economic challenges with grace. Even during downturns or price surges, Icelanders tend to maintain a strong sense of confidence, because they know they are not alone in their efforts. The system doesn't punish parents for having children or pressure them to sacrifice their careers. Instead, it supports a balanced, connected, and future-focused way of life, where raising a family is both a personal joy and a national investment. Traditional Icelandic food is a mirror of the island itself. Rugged, resilient, and surprisingly refined. Rooted in centuries of survival in a harsh and unforgiving climate, Icelandic cuisine was born not out of luxury, but out of necessity. Early settlers had to make do with what the land and sea gave them and what they could preserve long into the dark winters. This led to a culinary heritage based on preservation, simplicity, and one of the most iconic dishes is fermented Greenland shark. Though its ammonia-rich smell and sharp flavor may challenge modern palates, it once served as an important source of protein when refrigeration didn't exist. Similarly, harfiska, or dried fish, remains a popular snack. Wind-dried cod, or haddock, eaten with butter, high in protein and flavor, and often enjoyed by Icelanders as casually as chips. Lamb also holds a sacred place in the Icelandic kitchen. The sheep roam freely across wild highlands, feeding on moss and herbs, which gives their meat a uniquely mild and herbal flavor. Smoked lamb, or handjagdjút, is traditionally served during holidays, sliced thin and eaten cold or warm with potatoes and sauce. Dairy, especially skyr, is another staple. This thick, tangy yogurt-like cheese has been part of the Icelandic diet since Viking times and is now enjoyed plain, sweetened, or mixed with berries and granola. Traditional breads also hold cultural significance, particularly a dense, sweet rye bread often baked in geothermal steam underground, served with butter, smoked fish, or pickled herring. It's a taste of Iceland's geothermal ingenuity. While some dishes like svi or Mr. may seem extreme today, they reflect a time when no part of an animal could be wasted. Icelanders still prepare these dishes not from necessity, but from pride, as a way of honoring their ancestors' grit. Today, these foods live alongside more modern Nordic cuisine, but they are not forgotten. In fact, they're celebrated on dinner tables, in festivals, and in the quiet kitchens of families who still know that real nourishment is not just about taste, but about memory, place, and survival. In recent decades, traditional Icelandic food has undergone a quiet but powerful transformation. Once defined by necessity, it is now being redefined by creativity. Icelandic chefs, many of whom trained in Europe but returned home to cook with intention, have embraced the island's roots while elevating its flavors. What was once peasant food is now plated with artistry. A slab of rye bread becomes a base for foraged mushrooms and local cheese. Smoked lamb is reimagined in fine dining settings, with pickled crowberries and moss syrup. The humble skyer, long a breakfast staple, now appears in desserts paired with caramelized rhubarb or Arctic thyme. In and beyond, restaurants like Dill are at the forefront of this culinary creating what many call new Icelandic cuisine. A movement that is minimalist, hyperlocal, and deeply seasonal. Menus change constantly depending on what the sea, soil, or greenhouse has to offer. Wild herbs, seabirds, kelp, and even volcanic salt are used with care, never wastefully, and always in a way that tells a story. But modern Icelandic food isn't just found in upscale restaurants, it's alive in everyday kitchens. Too, home cooks have adapted the traditional diet to modern needs, blending global influence with cultural respect. Families still eat fish multiple times a week, whether grilled, fried, or in stews like plot. Lamb remains a favorite Sunday meal, often slow-roasted with root vegetables, while homemade flatcocker is eaten with butter and smoked meats. Preserving still has its place, especially in the countryside. People pickle beets, jar rhubarb jam, and dry herbs gathered from the hillside. Greenhouse-grown vegetables have become more common in recent decades, making dishes brighter, fresher, and more varied. International ingredients are used more than ever, but rarely to replace traditional staples. Instead, they're woven into meals with restraint and curiosity. A family might prepare curry-spiced cod one night and have pancakes with rhubarb jam the next. Through it all, the Icelandic relationship with food remains deeply practical, respectful, and honest. Meals are rarely wasteful. Ingredients are local when possible, and dining is more about nourishment and connection than indulgence. Even Iceland's rising food scene, praised by global food critics, retains that quiet humility. The most celebrated chefs still use recipes learned from their grandmothers. They forage for wild herbs in the same hills where their ancestors once gathered firewood. In Iceland, the food on your plate doesn't just fill your stomach, it connects you to the land, the past, and the people who knew how to make something beautiful from even the harshest conditions. Food in Iceland is more than sustenance, is memory, ritual, and identity, especially during the country's vibrant seasonal celebrations. Perhaps no event captures this more than the midwinter feast, rooted in Viking-era customs. Held during the darkest months, is a communal celebration where families and friends gather to share traditional foods once necessary for survival: fermented shark, smoked lamb, pickled ram, testicles, liver sausage, and blood pudding. While these dishes might seem extreme to outsiders, For Icelanders, they represent cultural pride. Each item on the table tells a story of endurance and resourcefulness, of how their ancestors survived the long, frozen winters with no imports, no fresh vegetables, and no refrigeration. Modern gatherings, whether in a cozy farmhouse or a large community hall, often blend humor with respect. People dress in Old Norse costumes, perform comedic songs or poems about Icelandic life, and toast with the potent Carawayfer schnapps, known as the Black Death. Despite the unusual flavors, the celebration is never about the food alone. It's about preserving heritage and laughing through the coldest, hardest season. Other times of year bring their own culinary customs. Easter is celebrated with roasted lamb, chocolate eggs from Icelandic chocolatiers, and a sense of renewal. Sumardagurinn fishy, the first day of summer, celebrated in April despite freezing temperatures, is marked with grilled meats and ice cream, often enjoyed outdoors in puffy jackets, more symbolic of hope than heat. Christmas is the most elaborate food celebration of the year. Icelanders prepare for weeks, baking cookies like kur, slow, dull roasting hangik tea, and preparing rich rice puddings and homemade breads. One beloved tradition involves hiding an almond in the Christmas rice pudding. Whoever finds it wins a small gift. The holiday table blends old and new. Traditional dried fruits and lamb alongside international treats and sparkling wines. Meals are slow and multi-course, often shared across several generations and always grounded in togetherness. Even New Year's Eve, which includes fireworks and bonfires, typically begins with a formal dinner at home, proof that even the flashiest holiday begins with the warmth of the kitchen. Iceland's food calendar is tied to the land and the seasons, and the people remain remarkably attuned to its rhythms. In autumn, families still gather berries in the highlands, smoke meats, and preserve herbs for winter. During spring lambing season, rural communities prepare fresh milk-based dishes like skyer and cheeses, and celebrate the arrival of lamb roasts and fresh butter. Even seemingly modest occasions, like Sunday dinners, often become weekly rituals of gathering, slow cooking, and conversation. These traditions reflect a quiet truth in Icelandic culture, that the best meals are those shared, not just consumed. That through centuries of hardship and isolation, the Icelanders didn't just survive. They learned how to make meals that remember, honor, and connect. In Iceland, food has always been a bridge between past and present, people and place, celebration and survival. In daily life, Icelanders approach food with the same simplicity and practicality that define so many other parts of their culture. Meals are rarely extravagant, but they are nourishing, intentional, and often prepared from scratch. Breakfast is typically light yet energizing. A common morning begins with a bowl of skyer, Iceland's high-protein cultured dairy product, served with berries, oats, or honey. Others may opt for thick rye bread with cheese, butter, or cold cuts. Coffee is usually strong, black, and consumed throughout the morning in small porcelain mugs or thermoses. Unlike in many countries where breakfast is rushed or skipped, Icelanders see it as an important grounding ritual. Even school children often eat before leaving the house, and many workplaces allow for a slow start to the day, with coffee breaks built into the rhythm. Lunch in Iceland is traditionally the largest meal of the day, though this is changing in cities. In rural areas, and for older generations, lunch might consist of a hot, home-cooked dish, often fish, lamb stew, or in urban workplaces and schools. However, lunch is more structured. Most schools provide nutritious hot meals for children featuring fish, vegetables, whole grains, and fruit served in communal dining halls, where kids learn to eat balanced, healthy portions. There's little junk food or sugary options, and fast food is generally reserved for weekends or treats. Adults often eat packed lunches of sandwiches, leftovers, or simple salads. Eating out for lunch is more common, in where cafes serve soups, open-faced sandwiches, and lunch platters at affordable prices for workers on a break. Dinner is a family affair, and while it may be lighter than lunch, it remains an important time to gather. Dishes are often seasonal and reflect both local ingredients and global influence. A weekday dinner might include oven-baked salmon with potatoes and vegetables, pasta with lamb or beef, or homemade fish cakes. Icelanders love to bake, and fresh bread is a common though convenience foods are increasingly available. Many families still cook from scratch, relying on family recipes and passing down culinary skills to younger generations. There's a strong respect for eating together, not just for nourishment, but for bonding. Dinner conversations often span current events, storytelling, and shared laughter. While smartphones and screens are present, they're typically set aside during meals. Grocery shopping in Iceland reflects the country's values of quality over excess. Supermarkets like and Hagkaup offer a mix of local and imported items, but even then, the selection is far smaller than in most countries, just a few brands per product, mostly fresh rather than packaged. Icelanders often shop in small batches, focusing on freshness, affordability, and minimal waste. There's a growing awareness of sustainable consumption, with more people choosing reusable bags, organic produce, and local goods when possible. Many Icelanders also supplement their groceries with food from their own land, whether it is lamb from a family farm, berries foraged in late summer, or dried fish prepared by a grandparent. Even in the most modern kitchens, the old ways still live on quietly, proudly, and with deep cultural meaning. In 2008, Iceland experienced one of the most catastrophic financial collapses in modern history, but what followed became a global case study in courage, accountability, and democratic resilience. At the height of the global credit boom, Iceland's three largest banks, Kaupthing and Landsbanki, had expanded far beyond the scale of the country's economy. These banks offered high-interest online savings accounts across Europe and made risky foreign investments, fueling a wave of apparent prosperity. For a time, shimmered with luxury cars, designer boutiques, and international ambition, but beneath the surface, the system was dangerously over. In October 2008, the global financial meltdown exposed the fragile core. Within a matter of days, all three banks collapsed, their combined debt totaling more than 10 times Iceland's GDP. The national currency, the plummeted, businesses shuttered. Thousands lost their savings, jobs, and homes. What made Iceland's crisis unique wasn't just the scale, it was how the country reacted. Instead of bailing out the failed banks, the Icelandic government let them fall. They protected domestic savings, but allowed foreign claims to fail. Then came something nearly unheard of: a peaceful revolution. Citizens flooded the streets, banging pots and pans in what became known as the kitchenware revolution. They demanded resignations, reforms, and justice, and they got them. The Prime Minister stepped down. A new government formed. Bank executives were tried and jailed. Iceland rewrote its constitution through crowdsourced citizen input. And while the road to recovery was painful, marked by inflation, strict capital controls, and IMF oversight, Iceland rebounded with surprising speed. By 2012, its economy was growing again. Today, Iceland stands as a rare example of a nation that faced a financial apocalypse, not with austerity or denial, but with transparency, humility, and collective will. It showed the world that even a small nation can demand integrity from its institutions and rebuild trust from the ground up. The 2008 financial crisis didn't just shake Iceland's economy, it reshaped its national identity. In the years that followed the collapse, Iceland undertook an extraordinary transformation, proving that recovery can come not from silence or scapegoating, but from reflection and reform. First came the legal reckoning. Iceland made history by prosecuting and jailing top banking executives, something virtually no other country did. The trials were not showpieces, they were thorough, deliberate, and rooted in the belief that responsibility matters. At the same time, the Icelandic people demanded structural change. The crisis had exposed just how disconnected their financial system had become from public interest. As protests surged and faith in political parties faltered, a new government emerged, one that was more left-leaning, transparent, and people-driven. The new leadership froze household debts, protected welfare services, and introduced stricter regulations on banking operations, while also imposing capital controls to stabilize the currency. In 2010, Iceland launched a groundbreaking experiment, crowdsourcing a new constitution. Citizens, not politicians, debated the future of their democracy on public forums, Facebook pages, and town halls. Although the draft constitution was never fully ratified due to political gridlock, the process itself signaled a deep cultural shift toward open government and citizen empowerment. Economically, Iceland took a bold path. Rather than embracing austerity, it prioritized social protection. It refused to repay foreign depositors from the failed Landsbanki iSave accounts, a move that sparked international disputes, but was eventually upheld by European courts. Domestically, Icelanders tightened belts and reorganized households, learned to live more modestly. Local production was emphasized, and the culture of reckless consumption began to fade. As tourism began to rise and fishing remained steady, the country gradually rebuilt. By the mid-2010s, Iceland had repaid its IMF loans and regained financial credibility. But unlike the pre-crisis era, where bankers and oligarchs dominated public life, the post-crisis Iceland championed equity, humility, and shared values. The lessons of 2008 became embedded in national memory. Iceland introduced a more transparent banking system, enhanced media watchdog roles, and strengthened financial education in schools. The crash had humbled a proud nation, but in doing so, it carved out a more balanced, introspective path forward. More than a decade later, many Icelanders still carry scars from the crisis, but those scars have become markers of growth. Iceland is no longer chasing the illusion of unlimited wealth. It is nurturing resilience, sustainability, and integrity. The pot-banging protesters of 2008 weren't just demanding justice, they were ringing in a new chapter of Icelandic democracy, one forged not in prosperity, but in the wisdom of hardship. When the banks fell, it wasn't just balance sheets that shattered, it was the quiet confidence of everyday Icelanders, who had long believed their island nation was insulated from the chaos of the outside world. In towns like Akureyri in the north and in the suburbs, of families woke up to find their mortgage suddenly doubled as the Icelandic crashed overnight. People who had taken out loans in foreign currencies enticed by low interest rates were now trapped in debt they couldn't understand, much less repay. One Reykjavik couple, and you're remembered watching their grocery bills skyrocket, while their modest cafe struggled to stay open. For the first time in their lives, they had to choose between paying the electricity bill or restocking shelves. In the countryside, where families relied on equipment bought through foreign loans, farmers were left with tractors they could no longer afford. But amidst the financial hardship, something unexpected happened. Neighbors leaned on each other more deeply than ever. People bartered, traded services, shared food, and reopened old practices of self-sufficiency: gardening, fishing, baking. Icelanders, long used to surviving through storms and volcanic winters, now relied on that same endurance to navigate economic ruin. Unemployment spiked, savings evaporated, and emigration surged, but Icelanders didn't despair in silence. They filled the streets, not with rage, but with resolve. In front of Alþingi, the parliament building in thousands stood shoulder to shoulder during the kitchenware revolution, banging pots and pans to demand accountability. It wasn't just young activists, mothers with babies, pensioners with walkers. Students, small business owners all joined in. Some brought traditional drums. Others sang old Icelandic folk songs. It became a protest rooted in national identity. A peaceful uprising not against the idea of government, but for a better one. Artists responded with music, literature, and theater that captured the emotion of the moment, turning grief into expression. Local musicians performed in the streets. Writers penned searing essays and memoirs. Even school children participated in mock parliaments, imagining how they might lead differently. In that time of darkness, Iceland's deep cultural fabric, a value of storytelling, music, family, and shared hardship became its greatest resource. Over the years that followed, Icelanders rebuilt not just their economy, but their sense of who they were. They questioned the values that had led them into the crisis: speed and disconnection, and recommitted to older ones: community, humility, and care for the land. Even today, many speak of 2008 not only as a moment of collapse, but as a cultural turning point, a reminder that true wealth lies not in banks or real estate, but in relationships, resilience, and the ability to begin again. As the dust settled and the world took notice, Iceland's recovery became more than just a national triumph. It became a symbol of democratic courage. While other nations bailed out banks and shielded executives from consequences, Iceland stood almost alone in its insistence that financial power must answer to the people. Economists, political scientists, and social reformers from across the globe began studying Iceland, not because it was a financial giant, but because it had done something radical. It had put democracy first. The world watched as ordinary citizens demanded transparency, accountability, and long-term reform. The crowdsourced constitution process, though never fully implemented, was hailed as a breakthrough in participatory democracy, and the trials of bankers sent a strong message that corruption would no longer hide behind technicalities. Iceland, long a quiet island of poets and farmers, was suddenly at the center of global conversations about how capitalism could be made fairer, more just, and more human. But Icelanders weren't interested in being held up as saints. They were focused on preparing the next generation so the mistakes of the past wouldn't be repeated. In classrooms across the country, financial literacy became a part of the conversation. Schools began to teach students not just how to calculate interest, but how to question it. How does debt work? What is ethical investing? How can a society balance economic ambition with social good? Civic education, too, was young Icelanders were encouraged to understand their rights as citizens, how parliament works, and why protests matter. They were taught that democracy isn't just something you vote for, it's something you actively build. At the same time, Iceland's political culture began to shift. New parties emerged led by environmentalists, feminists, digital freedom advocates, and ordinary citizens who had never imagined a life in politics before the crisis. The country's first openly lesbian prime minister took office shortly after the Crasher signal that Iceland's vision for the future would be more inclusive, bold, and progressive. Community centers became hubs for discussion and debate. Art, music, and literature continued to reflect the trauma and healing of the nation. Even businesses adopted new models favoring cooperatives, ethical banking, and locally rooted enterprises. By the late 2010s, Iceland had not only rebuilt economically, it had evolved culturally and politically. It had become a country that could look its children in the eye and say, "We made mistakes. We learned. And now, it's your turn to do better." And perhaps that is the most extraordinary part of Iceland's recovery. Not the financial graphs that trended upward, but the quiet, determined belief that a small country led by ordinary people could rewrite its own story and inspire others to do the same.